Try.
Cool. Well, my name is Charlie Stevenson, and I'm the treasurer for Student Senate.
Major Burga, Student Vice President.
And today we are presenting on behalf of the Student Senate and Educational Opportunity Fund. So what will we be covering today? We're going to run over the Student Senate activity fee and what makes up that fee, including block, line, and Wednesday night funding. We'll also have a brief look at the our current Student Senate budget. This won't be something that we vote on today, but just wanted to kind of give you an idea of where our head's at for that. And then finally, we will take a peek at EOF. So moving on to the next slide. Here we have two scenarios for the Senate activity fee ask. Scenario A is a $16.50 total activity fee. Now encompassing that is $13.80 for block fund, $2.15 for line funding, and 55 cents for the Wednesday night fund. The top diagram is fee dollars, bottom dollar is the total dollars. And then over in scenario B, it is a $15.50 ask, representing a $4.50 decrease. Now, moving on to the next slide. What does this money do? Where does it go to? The block funding supports long-established programs and initiatives for student success on campus here. And then line item and Wednesday night funds supports all student organizations at the university. Now, why increase block and line but cut Wednesday night funding? Well, we want to encourage groups to apply ahead of time for fundraising for the upcoming school year. If you look back at the budget, in both of these possible scenarios, we are increasing line item funding by almost double in both cases to $100,000. This would be so we're able to really reward and encourage student groups to be able to come in and get money allocated so that they're able to plan ahead for the coming school year, as well as freeing up Student Senate to be able to focus on what it's initially set out to be as laid out in the preamble to the Student Senate Constitution. And then moving on to the next slide.
Thanks, Charlie. Well, this is going to be our internal budget, so we're spending internally as an organization. Nothing set in stone, nothing that we're deciding here today, but I just wanted to give you guys a glimpse into where our heads are at, what we want to present. I think last year's administration maybe was a little bit too much around the board, and we identified a couple spots where we can cut that back a little bit. As for the office budget, you'll see that's about a 20% cut. We haven't touched very much of that while we've been serving, so we think that we can move that back a little bit in. KUID cards as well. In theory and as an idea, it's a great service, but the reality is regulations and laws are changing every day. And we'd like a clear outlook from the university administration and leadership. That's what we should be doing in that space. We can reevaluate that as we go, keep an eye on it, but as for now, we think we should cut that. And the next slide, we'll move on to the educational opportunity fee. This covers the fund that we all know, the Educational Opportunity Fund, or the EOF. And if we go to the next slide, thank you, Nathan. Next slide. Appreciate it. The EOF is going to provide scholarships, fellowships, need-based grant, broad student aid, supporting our students here at KU while they're here and on their educational journey. You guys know where I'm at when it comes to financial aid. We believe that our students should be supported while they're here. We think that this is a very important fee, very important part of student funding. We're really big components of it. You guys know that the EOF is evaluated, reviewed, voted on by the EOF board, which comprises a lot of university representation from across the school, while also containing a lot of representation that comprises a lot of representation from here in Student Senate. This is outlined in the Constitution, and they'll start meeting in a couple of weeks. We'll get their idea of where they want to put that money. We're currently allocated $4 for that. We want to keep that flat. While we do think it's important, we keep that flat so we can invest it moving forward. And here you'll see how it's broken out a little bit more clearly, $184,000 in the EOF. And you'll see that there's a broad spectrum of scholarships and grants that it covers. One type of student at KU, but rather the broad spectrum of students we have here, covering every corner of the university. This isn't set in stone, this isn't decided on today, but when the EOF starts meeting, we'll have a better idea of where to put that money, keeping it flat at $4.
Now, just going back, this is a summary of kind of everything that we're looking at. A couple points that I do want to include that I forgot to mention when going over the initial budget is there is $2.94 that we are cutting out. That was included in the $20 ask from last year. But as we all know, there was a significant deficit that we had to cover back. And now that we are no longer in that rough financial position, we don't need money to claw back for our carry forward. So we've taken that out of the budget, as well as the student support and case management organization. They've historically been a block funding organization, but this year they've transitioned to line. Now, not transitioned to line, but transitioned to required student fee, as we saw their presentation yesterday. This, we haven't decided on what their allocation will be, if any, but if that were the case, the $4 that they've received in previous years should be opened up, and making that $1.47 decrease really a $2.50 increase, and same thing for activity fee, option B. And then EOF is staying flat as well at that $4 mark. And we'd like to open it up. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to help.
Let's go with Simra.
Yeah, and so I have a question specifically about where funding for the ID replacement cards it'd be completely eliminated. My question is on a constitutional requirement to which our constitution says the student senate shall cover students' replacement fees for university identification cards on a first come first served basis with such procedures and rules as the student senate sees fit to fulfill its programs and objectives. Now, seeing that it's completely cut, do you think that would inhibit your ability to fulfill this constitutional, order or responsibility that you guys have?
It certainly would, and I'm glad you brought that up because I missed that, to be completely honest. Luckily, that won't be presented for another couple of weeks, so we'll be able to throw that back in.
And for a quick point of information regarding that, all of the fees and their rates actually used to be in the Constitution, like number for number. So because the fee package needs to pass both Finance Council and the Assembly by a 2/3 vote, that's the same margin for a constitutional amendment. So we'll just have to make sure it's written up to remove that from the Constitution if that's what we decide. Okay. We can go back to Simra if nobody else has any questions. Okay, Simra, go ahead.
Well, I just had a follow-up in that sense of if we were to recommend that, X amount be specifically to fulfill this constitutional requirement, would that be okay? Or would you have an opposition to that?
No, I have no opposition to it. I think that it is not as effective as we had set out for it to be. The students who it was really intended for are no longer the ones who are exclusively receiving that benefit. But since we have it laid out in the Constitution that it's first come, first served, I have no problem funding this.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, if there's no questions, I did want to ask just like update / clarification. What does the financial situation, like specifically in regards to the deficit, look like this year compared to last year? Because like you mentioned, we're no longer funding that deficit reserve or to address that.
I know I'm unsure as of what it was last year, what our exact deficit was. Do you have any info on that?
We allocated $170,000 more than the revenues were projected to bring in. A lot of that is projections, and so after the year followed up, things fell differently. Allocations went unspent. We maybe got more revenue than was projected. So if you look at the simulation file that Casey and Charlie completed, our numbers are looking a lot better.
Yes, I'm pulling that up right now so I can get what our balance is going to look like after this year. Off the top of my head, I think it was like 75,000, but I don't want to give a number until I actually have it in front of me.
70 is definitely the start of the number. Yeah. And that is after the 90-day reserve, which is the other piece.
Yeah, we're going to have about a $72,000 balance after taking out our $220,000 90-day reserve, which is calculated by just taking 25% of our expenses.
Okay. What other questions do we have? Seeing Simra, go ahead.
Does student senate anticipate in the future need having deficit issues or like possibly like wanting an increase to go back to a historical amount of, I think, 80K for Wednesday night funding, or we just always can operate in this, limited budget?
No, there would be no problems going up in the future as it's laid out now. Before it was the Wednesday night fund, it was the unallocated fund. And so that unallocated money can be added to the Wednesday night fund if that money were to run out. But having that $25,000 set out will make it a little more focused towards groups that are coming in for an event that is maybe topical, something that came up that wasn't planned but needed an event. And we still want to be able to fund that and have that flexibility, potentially for new organizations as well. But we are thinking that we should really be encouraging student groups and rewarding them for coming in and applying for line and getting that money early so they can set out their plans for the year and make the allocation process much easier, as well as freeing up a lot of student senate's time so they don't have to waste a majority of, and I know finance council for sure, but assemblies as well, passing funding bills.
Do we have any other questions? Yeah.
I was actually curious, since I see that we're not paying any permanent staff salary in fringe, is student senate required then to have a line grant operating reserve?
Yes, because you give block money to somebody that does have staff right now. Yeah. And you guys also have students that make money, so therefore you have to have a 90-day reserve. Otherwise, the students wouldn't get paid. Good question.
What other questions do we have? I have a bit of a follow-up really quick. So you mentioned wanting to move more of the funds and focus towards things like line item and block funding. So those allocations for the next academic year. What do you think are some steps to kind of communicate that to students, communicate that to clubs? Because I mean, here at Student Senate, we have a lot of turnover, but so do a lot of clubs, and sometimes it's hard to keep up with that kind of financial turnover.
Certainly, and I think that involvement of the student senate and communicating with the groups they're involved with will be a huge part of this. As well as that, we want to spread that message on our social media saying, hey, this money is available to you, and it is going to be a much simpler process than coming in for Wednesday night funding. We will have this money set aside for the next coming year. And I think that on the Instagram page, we can certainly reach a certain amount of groups, and we will be looking into other avenues as well to spread that message as much as we can.
Definitely, and we have a very active social media presence. We've made a point to make that difference this year. We also expect our students to be leaders in their constituencies and leaders in the communities that they serve. So these organizations should have a better picture of what it's going to be, what the timeline actually looks like, and the standards we're out there doing the work.
Okay. What questions do we have? Mia?
I'm just curious to, sorry, maybe I'm just misreading the simulation file, but I'm seeing for that fiscal year 2027, under your proposed scenario, there's also zeroed out student staff salary in fringe. So I'm just wondering, is that factored into that other expenses?
Yeah, I'll answer it. Okay, so the way that I do the simulation file is I do the current year, I show you in the prior year, I show you what was actually spent in the student hourly and everything. But when you are building the budgets, you guys are allocating money on a line base. And so I don't break it out until the next year with salary and fringe. So that's why you see a sum at the bottom where we added in the fringe amounts, because we don't split it out at the top. It's just built into the line. Do you have more to add?
Kind of like we don't project out what you guys are gonna allocate. So we just put it at the bottom there for next fiscal year. We just put block line Wednesday night, kind of what's decided, instead of really filtering it in. We just do the current fiscal year and the previous fiscal year to kind of show, but we don't want to make assumptions on what you all will decide. So it does look a little different than the other simulation files.
Yeah. So just to clarify, that's because this money that we're allocating right now will be further broken down during block.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any other questions? Last call for questions. Seeing Omowumi.
I understand that, the student senate is requested for an increase, but what about if that reaction shows something?
Good.
Okay. Because I'm checking through the PowerPoint here, and that is what I could see, except if I'm seeing something different.
Did you ask for requesting the
I
increase?
said,
Yes, in overall increase of 3.65.
It'd be, the two scenarios that we've laid out are a $3.50 and a $4.50 decrease.
I think you might just do last year's.
For the, okay.
I will quickly ask a follow-up that might help answer this in the meantime. Could you elaborate on the difference between those two scenarios and kind of what it would look like for clubs or just student senate as a whole?
Yeah, scenario A has an extra $5,000 in the Wednesday night fund and an additional $10,000 in block and 25 roughly in line. And so scenario A just lays out where each of those three major units are receiving a little bit more money, $1 in total that's spread out between the three, between scenario A and B.
Okay. Wunmi, did that answer your question, or do you have a follow-up?
No.
Okay. Do we have any more questions here? Okay. Is there also a CDF presentation that's separate?
Yes, there is a CDF.
I will go ahead and pull that up for y'all.
So just to preface this presentation a little bit, Andrew Phelan is the Fund Development Director who was unfortunately not able to be here today because he has the flu. He was the one who put this presentation together and really knows the ins and outs. So bear with me here. I'm presenting this without really knowing a whole lot. If we need questions answered that I'm not able to, we can certainly reach out to him and try to get those questions answered for us all. But on that note, I'm still Charlie Stevenson, and right now we'll be going over the Community Development Fund fee ask. So what is the Community Development Fund? Well, CDF provides dedicated support for student organizations and events that promote diversity, intercultural education, and supports for marginalized students. Today, fiscal year 26 allocations total $8,140.49. And this provides financial support to create inclusive spaces on campus and funds events that must be open to all students except for the travel funding, which CDF does have that option. Now, our impact. All organizations are contacted within 24 hours of receiving funding. Now, I believe this means when they're allocated funding, they'll be reached out to practically immediately to get that fulfilled. Now, I think that is prefaced because of an upcoming point, but we have in all 9 cycles approved funding requests. Now, and we've also supported travel to 4 different conferences. The ask this year is a 25-cent decrease to 75 cents, and this would reduce the revenue of CDF by roughly $10,000 and bring that projected revenue to just about $35,000. Now, why the decrease? The fund has seen significantly less activity than in previous years. Now, this could be because of a lack of student awareness, because of the rebrand that came as of last year due to factors outside of our control. But for this year, with that dollar, the CDF revenue was $46,301. Now, through allocation throughout the year, that 8,041 number that I brought up on the other slide, that's been what has been allocated from meetings. Now, out of that $8,000 that has been awarded and allocated, only 3,070 has been claimed and actually drawn on. I guess the organizations have just not been drawing on that funding that they came in and got awarded for. But CDF also has its own line allocations. Now those total 11,570. CDF has its own line process separate from the student-centered activity fee line allocations. Now this brings the current year unallocated balance to just over $31,662. Now, with this historical fee, we can see that it's been around 90 cents in the past. Now, I'm unsure of what the carry forward figures look like, but should the trend of the CDF continue on like this, there will be a substantial carry forward going into the next year. And should that be drawn on, like we hope it will, then we would be open for an increase in the future. But in the current financial position of the CDF as it is now, we see it appropriate to decrease the ask down to 75 cents. Open floor up to questions. Yeah.
Can I just add in one more point?
Yeah,
sure.
Just one more point since you just mentioned the carry forward. I have numbers from Andrew saying that last year there was 28,700 carry forward, and the year prior it was 34,600 carry forward. So there is a trend of this.
What other questions do you have? Simon?
So, I'm sorry, the total, all your asks, it would be a differential of 225, correct, a decrease?
between like student-centered activity, it would be less than that. It would be a decrease of scenario A, it'd be 350 plus the 25, scenario B, 450 plus the 25.
What other questions? I do have a question. So you mentioned that CDF has its own line allocation process, and historically that has been done at the same time as the general line allocation process. And the only difference on the student club side is just a place to mark on the form. Do you also want to qualify for CDF funding? So that is all kind of deliberated in a similar space. Do you see it being done like that in the future, or kind of how are you budgeting, keeping in mind that so far it's been a similar process and deliberations, but just pulling from different fund sources? Does that make sense?
So you're asking how the process would be different, or if we should change the process moving forward in the future?
Yeah, yes, but also how are you budgeting given that understanding? Because what I'm saying, and this applies for line, you don't know how many student organizations are going to ask for CDF line versus regular line. And I mean, generally, you don't know how many are going to ask for line in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But just what are the budgeting considerations there?
Well, they're much more open because under these two budgets we've laid out, line would more than double. So we have a lot more money to give out. From what I've seen, the applications coming in, we already have about 15 line applications coming in. So there's clearly interest from student organizations to get money early. And those applications won't close for, I believe, another month at least.
Mhm.
And so there's still plenty of time for all of those student organizations to apply well ahead of time. Now, between the CDF and regular line allocations, I'm unsure. I would have to think of more on how we would budget between those two. There would be a significantly more amount of money in the student senate line. And under the current regulations, I believe, I think all student organizations that apply, that are acceptable for Wednesday night funding can now apply for CDF. And so it's really up to the club, I guess, at that point.
Yeah.
I'd have to think more on it as well.
Just for a point of information and some background on that, the main utility of CDF line as opposed to the student senate line item funding is that CDF has different funding rules. Like the $500 food limit is a great example that we have right now. CDF has different regulations there, while Wednesday night funding has that $500 food limit. And just to be clear, student senate line follows Wednesday night fund rules, and then CDF line follows CDF rules. Sure. Similar, but slightly different.
Like you can get travel through CDF.
Yeah. Any questions?
I do have one. Just quickly running the numbers, could you go back a couple of slides to where we have the difference in the money that's actually, yes, the fulfillments and awarded but unclaimed. I was curious how you guys ran those numbers and maybe how frequently or how recently you did that, because I agree that we're at about 8,000 awarded, but I do want to have a caveat that I believe 3,000 of that was on Tuesday. So the groups haven't necessarily had a chance to pick that up. So that would account for 3,000 of that 5,000. And, there's only one group that never responded to the request for that $700. And then there were two groups that had, events canceled for weather, and that together, they accumulated to only about $300. So I just wanted to make sure that our math was adding up on that, because I think unless, my spreadsheet is out of date, we're missing about an extra $1,000. And that could possibly be from, allocations still in the works for the conference trial.
Yeah, I didn't put together this presentation, so I'm not sure how the numbers exactly came from, but I don't have access to that folder. I would like to, but yeah, I don't have much to add on that point.
Sorry, that was just clarification.
Good. I had a quick question. What happens to money that does go unclaimed with this fund?
And I will just go back into the carry forward for next year.
What questions do we have? Last call for questions. Okay. Seeing no questions, thank you. Okay. Do we have any general, because that's the end of our hearings, right? Our deliberations will start back up right in here at 1 p.m. Do we have any questions or concerns or anything? I mean, while the live stream's still running, anything we want to talk about before we move into there? Just making sure. Like preferably relating to the hearings and things like that before we start deliberations. Because we're gonna talk a lot about what deliberations are gonna look like, things like that, back here at 1 p.m. Okay, just want to make sure. I will go ahead and end this live stream. Thank you.